So, hello and welcome to the Gaggle, where we challenge and, if necessary, destroy media narratives. I'm George Samueli. With me today, of course, is co-founder of the Gaggle, Peter Lavelle, and we're doing another one of our live streams. Always very, very exciting and
It's
very
touch and
challenging.
go, though. It's always
It's touch and go. I mean, it's we never know whether it's going to work out or not. Chances are it won't, but we try to maintain a level of optimism. So, Peter, welcome. How are you today?
It's Monday all day. It used to be. Well, it still happens to us that we convene and it's like, well, it's Monday, and plus considering our time zones, we're very early for the Western world, particularly me.
Yep. Yes.
And what can we talk about? But then over the weekend, well, there was just an avalanche of news, so there's lots to
News.
talk.
That's right. So, I mean, we talked about a number of things. We got people joining us. Very good. Putin's shirt. So welcome, Putin's shirt and Elizabeth Robb. It says, "Yeah, my fave men." Oh, thank you so much. That's very kind of you. Thank you. Um,
I'm sure she's making reference to the dogs.
I think so. I think so. I think the dogs are much more popular than either of us is. But because I mean, we can continue talking about no, Keith McGlashing. Welcome. So we talked a great deal about the peace conference, the so-called peace conference in Switzerland yesterday, and then of course we talked about Putin's lengthy address to the Russian Foreign Ministry on towards the end of last week, and I want to talk a little bit about those documents that are published by the New York Times, because they're quite interesting, and it's interesting. And what I think instructive is how willfully people are misinterpreting what was in those documents, and particularly with Michael Tracy. And Michael Tracy, I think, is one of these journalists. He's a little bit of a contrarian. He's a smart guy, but he's willfully misunderstanding what's in those documents. Anyway, but before that, we talk about what happened in Switzerland. So apparently, we had 78 countries signed onto that fairly banal communique. When we talked about that communique, about food security, nuclear security, and I think exchanges of prisoners.
Prisoner exchange.
Yeah. But then it turns out that when we looked at the countries that signed on, bringing up the 78 were obviously the NATO gang, the EU posse, and then the also rans. So Monaco, was signed on, which is always good. I always wonder, the people in Monaco. I mean, what do they worry about? I mean, they just how much can we make on the casinos? How much we can rip people off on the casinos? Stupid, rich, fat people who go to Monaco and for their vacations. But apparently they're very interested in.
Well, they're very Ukraine curious, George.
Yeah, I guess so. And of course Kosovo, which isn't even a state, was also one of the signatories.
But they heard the buffet was
exactly. They thought it was very nice. If you go in there, you got the Monaco representative. You might ask her, "Hey, can I get a discount on in Monaco?" But anyway, what I think was significant was not just who didn't attend. Obviously, China didn't attend. Russia obviously wasn't invited. India attended, but India did not sign the communique. Brazil only attended as an observer status, obviously didn't sign the communique. Indonesia did not sign the communique. And, the story today that some of the countries whose signatures appear under the communique have rescinded their signatures.
Well, one has to wonder, George, did they did someone put their name there?
Well, that's
And
what
then
I mean. It's like, did
then
they
they
actually
notice
say,
it and say,
hey,
oh,
we never signed? Yeah, yeah, that's right. So, for instance, Jordan and Iraq, their signatures were on the communique, but apparently now they said that we never signed. So if you start taking out things that have no business being there, like Kosovo and Liechtenstein, then you don't really have much of
well, you can add on to that, George. I mean, I don't have it in front of us, and I don't think it's actually knowable unless you're inside the loop. But I mean, what was the level of people that were there? They're like deputy ministers or sub ministers. I mean, we don't know about the
No,
caliber.
I think the NATO gang were there. I think at the highest levels. I think actually I don't know whether Macron was there, but Maloney was there, Schultz was there, and so they showed up at the highest level.
It was good that Maloney was there, because Joe started to wander off again, and she had to come to his rescue. She cut across the screen and very gently, as you do with an elderly man, you took him by the elbow and kind of,
Right.
this is where we are. We're going this way. It's really sad. It's really sad.
It's very sad. I don't know whether you saw that. That footage. It's going around on Twitter, where Obama and Biden were at a fundraiser, and then Biden just sort of freezes up in doing a Mitch McConnell thing, just freezes up, and Obama really has to lead him off the stage. I mean, you can actually see him pushing him. It's like and keeps his arm on Biden's shoulder throughout. So because Obama was obviously afraid that if he takes his hands off Biden's shoulder, Biden will again freeze up. So he kind of put his hand on, in the way that Obama does, but just keeps pushing him towards the exit. So
4 more years.
Yeah, 4 more years, exactly. That's it. So, but the Saudi foreign minister was there at the summit, and he made a pithy comment saying, "I don't quite understand what the point of these conferences is if you don't bring Russia into them." And Saudi Arabia did not sign the communique. Neither did the United Arab Emirates. Neither did Egypt. It's very much a kind of a second 11. I mean, it's not the major powers of the world. I don't think they're going to have any more of these types of conferences. I mean, they're saying, "Oh, we're going to have another one in Saudi Arabia." I don't think Saudi Arabia is going to host another conference like this.
But an utter fiasco. I mean, again, as I am wont to do, I did a quick cursory review of the mainstream, and again, this was a roaring success. Oh, but a couple people didn't show up. That's it. Okay.
Right.
And what's really important, and George and I strive to be as fair as possible. Putin did give a major address to Russia's diplomats. It was very lengthy. George and I did a blowout video on it yesterday.
Long.
If you want to do it, I mean,
it's on YouTube. People can watch it on YouTube. It was very long, but we went through the
stuff. Okay. I mean, you get the Visine out and coffee. Okay. It was marathon, and we didn't go through all the slides. Okay. But I mean, what's really interesting, talking about the media coverage of it, there was no mention, or hardly any mention, that very strategically, media-wise, Russia said, again, these are our terms. And as George and I have made it very clear, you can disagree with the terms, but those are the terms and conditions of engagement. And that's what that was all about. And mainstream media covering this ridiculous farce in the Alps doesn't make any kind of reference to it. And they should. And that is just malpractice on their part.
Right. Exactly. So we mentioned yesterday that the New York Times did a big story over the weekend in which somewhat late in the day, they say, yeah, well, we were very close to peace in the spring of 2022. And they published the documents. I don't have a subscription to the New York Times. That's by decision of the New York Times, because I tried to pay a number of times and they kept rejecting my payments. So, put down your card information, and every time I put down my card information, they said, nope, sorry, can't do it. And so basically, I've given up trying to get a subscription to the New York Times. So it may be that if you have a subscription, you'd be able to get the original document. So we have to kind of rely on the Times' accounts and excerpts from the original documents. But it's clear, and even from the New York Times, a somewhat deceptive account, that the issue was the security guarantees. And it's willfully misunderstood, because they don't seem to realize the key ingredient in any kind of a deal on Ukraine, which is that Russia needs security guarantees. They don't seem to understand it. The Times doesn't understand it. Michael Tracy doesn't understand it. All the people who are writing about it don't understand it. The only power that needs security guarantees is Ukraine. No, that's the whole point. That's the reason why we got here with is that Russia and Ukraine both need security guarantees.
This, you and I have covered this territory a lot. It's Putin's land grab. Putin wants to reestablish the Soviet Union. Wants to deny the existence of Ukraine and Ukrainian. All of that is hogwash. If you look at the documents, it's very, very clear that George is spot on here. This is all about security. And you said yesterday, there can only be peace when there is security. And that's something that's it. It's simple to say, but it's never acknowledged.
Right. Exactly. So let me see if I can show you this Times article. See if we can take a look at what it did. Okay, can you see it, Peter?
Good work, George. Wow, that's cool.
All right. So
it's easy to impress me. Okay.
Yeah, I know it's easy to impress me as well, but I had to have a very nice person at Rumble explain to me how to do this, because it's not intuitive. Somebody has to hold your hand and walk you through it. But
if George were ever to star in a Star Trek series, this is what it would look like. It's really cool.
But anyway, so this is the headline. And then he goes on, blah, blah, the usual thing about the talks failed as both sides dug in on the battlefield, but not before negotiators produced multiple drafts of the treaty that was supposed to guarantee Ukraine's future security while fulfilling some of President Putin's demands. Again, it's always the emphasis. The only issue is Ukraine's future security, and not, which is why Putin made those, issued those documents in December 2021. I mean, the whole point is that everybody's security has to be guaranteed. We can't just simply guarantee. This is the usual NATO talk. Well, NATO's security, NATO's safety. That's the only thing that matters is the security of the NATO members. But everybody's security has to be guaranteed.
And this is on the back of. There's a long history of this here. Those of us that are a bit older, we had the entire Helsinki process and the OSCE, and their calling card was the indivisibility of security. So George is right. You can't talk about Ukraine's security without talking about the security of other countries. That's all intertwined. That's something the mainstream media and the punditry on YouTube failed to.
That's right, exactly. And if you're going to just have NATO embedded in Ukraine, then obviously you're not providing Russia with any security, and something that's obviously unacceptable to Russia. So then it goes on. Russia initially wanted Ukraine to recognize Crimea as part of Russia. Ukraine recognizes blah, blah, blah. And then he says, by April the 15th, both sides agreed to exclude Crimea from their treaty, leaving it under Russian occupation, but without Ukraine recognizing it. And then he goes on, an examination of the document shows that the two sides clashed over issues, including weapons levels, the terms of Ukraine's potential membership in the European Union, and specific Ukrainian laws on language and culture that Russia wanted repealed. So again, we know about this language and culture. You know, those were Ukraine in 1991 refused to make Russian an official language, not the official language, an official language, even though everyone in Ukraine speaks Russian. And then Yanukovych made a very mild reform. He just said that in those parts of Ukraine where Russian speakers, I think more than 17% of the population, Russian will be an official language. And it was this law of Yanukovych, that was the first thing the coup leaders did, was to cancel this language law, this language reform, that very mild language reform that Yanukovych had instituted. And then it says Ukraine's negotiations offered to forego NATO membership and to accept Russian occupation of parts of their territory, but they refused to recognize Russian sovereignty over them. And then Ukraine proposed never joining NATO or other alliances. And then Russia demanded that Ukraine make Russian an official language. And you know, imagine, this is, you know, the whole idea of making Russian an official language, it's not a big deal. Why should that be this enormous, horrific demand to say it's an official language? In other words, government documents are published both in Ukrainian and in Russian.
Well, and all the more so, everyone, up until the point of this gross censorship inside of Ukraine under the Zelensky regime, is that the most popular websites, entertainment and news in Ukraine were all in Russian. So it's not as if people don't know the language, okay? And it's something that really angered the ultra-nationalists, that people were still relying upon, and a lot of them were Russian sources on the internet, went straight to Russian sources. So the vast majority of people were using these, and their censorship regime was trying, and they still, I'm sure, people using VPNs and whatnot. So this is really kind of pushing against going against the stream.
That's right. That's exactly right. And then Russia, stunned by the fierce resistance Ukraine was putting up, seemed open to such a deal, but eventually balked at its critical component, an arrangement binding other countries to come to Ukraine's defense if it were ever attacked again. And so we'll come to that, because again, this is kind of misconceived, because if it was just going to be, well, hey, the NATO powers give Ukraine security guarantees, well, that's very nice. But essentially, then Russia is in the same position as before, which is Ukraine is a member of NATO. And how, you know, why would Russia accept such a thing? I mean, it has to be, everybody is bound to the security of Ukraine, which means that there has to be unanimity before there's any kind of military intervention in Ukraine. And then here, the Times helpfully puts out the sticking points that kept Russia and Ukraine apart. And then it says here, Ukraine's effort to join the Western military alliance were at the core of Mr. Putin's justifications for invading the country in February 2022. Russia demanded that Ukraine never join NATO or other alliances, host foreign military bases or weapons, or conduct military exercises with other countries without its consent. In the 2022 talks, Russia pledged not to stand in the way of Ukraine's possible membership in the European Union. Ukraine offered to become a permanently neutral state and to terminate international treaties and agreements that are incompatible with permanent neutrality. But in the 2 years since, Ukraine's leaders have become more vocal about seeking to join the Western military alliance as Russia's war has continued. But remember, I mean, the problem from Russia's point of view is, why would Russia believe anything that the Western powers claim? I mean, the point is just, you know, you need something. I mean, this was Putin said this, I think, in November 2021. We want some cast iron guarantees that you're not going to go back on your pledge. Oh, yeah, we'll be neutral until the day after tomorrow, and then we'll go back to seeking NATO membership. So that's the reason for that security guarantees, and everybody has to be pledged to a security of Ukraine, and there has to be unanimity on this.
Well, and what's interesting, folks, We're talking about the first few weeks of the conflict, but these are the terms and conditions Russia proposed before the conflict. These are the terms and conditions Russia had proposed weeks into the conflict, and lo and behold, everybody, this is exactly what we heard at the end of last week. That hasn't changed.
That's right. And then it goes on. Security guarantees what happens if Ukraine is attacked again. Pledges from other countries to protect Ukraine if Russia mounts another invasion are bound to be at the center of any durable peace, some experts say. Notice again how the Times frames it. That's the only thing that matters, rather than, which was Russia say, NATO expansion to Russia's borders is the sticking point. And it has to be remembered what triggered this was, I think it was October, when Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin made a speech. I think it was in Georgia, said the door to NATO membership for Ukraine is open. That's it. He said it's open. I mean, in other words,
and Kamala Harris said exactly the same thing at the Munich Security Conference.
Right.
Of the same.
Exactly. So, when Sergeant Schultz says, "Oh, this is completely ridiculous. There was never any plan to bring Ukraine into NATO." He's a liar. He's a liar. Either he's a liar,
or he's an idiot,
or he's an idiot. Exactly, one or the other. But of course, they said it because if it's U.S. policymakers who say it, then that it goes. Schultz doesn't determine NATO policy. The United States determines what happens in NATO. So if the most senior people in the United States says the road to NATO membership is open, then that means it's going to happen, and sooner rather than later.
And then Stoltenberg belatedly admitted that yes, the conflict was initiated on the part of Russia because of NATO expansion.
Yes,
he said it himself.
He said it himself. Yeah, absolutely. And then Ukraine proposed a security mechanism that would be triggered in the event of an armed attack in Ukraine. The guarantor countries that signed onto the treaty would hold urgent and immediate consultations for no more than 3 days. Then they would take individual or joint action as may be necessary to protect Ukraine, including establishing a no-fly zone, providing weapons, as using military force. And then Russia agreed to much of Ukraine's security guarantees proposal, but with key exceptions. It balked at the idea of other countries establishing a no-fly zone or providing Ukraine with weapons. In other words, unilaterally, they go ahead and establish a no-fly zone or provide. Remember, the other countries are all NATO powers. So it's essentially NATO can just unilaterally establish a no-fly zone. So in fact, Ukraine can start up the war anytime it chooses. And then, if Russia responds, then they say, hey, we're under attack from Russia, and go to the guarantors. Hey, we're under attack.
Even Israel doesn't get this from the United States.
That's right. Yeah. Most important, Russia sought to insert a clause that would require all guarantor countries, including Russia itself, to agree on military intervention. That's it. That's the crucial point. Otherwise, these guarantees are just simply a freebie for NATO. Start a war and then declare that Russia is the aggressor, even though Russia is responding to NATO's aggressive moves. The idea stands as perhaps the most intractable sticking point in the draft, rendering the security guarantees moot by allowing Russia to veto any international response if it invaded Ukraine again. So you see how it misconceives what was really going on. There was also a question, what countries would actually be willing to guarantee Ukraine's security? United States, UK, France, China, and Russia itself were all listed in the draft of the treaty as guarantors. Russia also wanted to include Belarus, while Ukraine wanted to add Turkey. It's unclear whether the countries had given their assent. If Ukraine eventually joins NATO, the Western alliance will have to deal with similarly thorny issues about how to respond if Ukraine is attacked again. And then we have the territory, how much of Ukraine will remain under Russian occupation. For Ukraine, a peace deal would be likely to come at the expense of accepting Russian control over some part of its territory. in the 2022 talks, Ukraine refused to recognize Russian control over any of the country, including Crimea. But Ukraine did offer a deal in which the two countries would agree to resolve issues related to Crimea through 10 or 15 years of diplomacy, and would pledge to avoid doing so by military means.
That's a major concession. If Russia had agreed to that, would be a major concession.
Huge concession.
Huge.
Ukraine appeared ready to accept some swathe of the country's east, also remaining under Russian occupation, with the precise contours to be hashed out in a meeting between President Zelensky and Mr. Putin that never came. And again, Zelensky's position has since hardened. He says Ukraine is fighting to liberate all internationally recognized territory, including Crimea. Russia's stance has also fluctuated. At the outset of the 2022 negotiations, Russia demanded that Ukraine give up its entire eastern Donbass region and recognize Russian sovereignty over Crimea. By April, Russia had accepted a model in which Crimea and some other parts of Ukraine would remain under Russian occupation, that Ukraine would not recognize as being legal. So these are enormous concessions. Of course, the Times realizes that, hey, this is very different from the picture that you've been painting about Russian ambitions. So then they have to put in, oh, that's because Ukraine was doing so well in the war. Russia was getting its clock clean, and that's why it was making concessions. No, it was because Russia wanted to bring this war to an end, as any power wanted to bring it to an end, and was putting forward very reasonable terms, but not dissimilar from Minsk. I mean, it's like, so to say that, oh, well, Russia was being beaten by Ukraine, these are not dissimilar from what was supposed to be enacted under Minsk that the NATO powers in Ukraine refused to implement.
Yes, I mean, when you look at the totality of it all, what Russia wanted then was very modest, George.
Yes, very modest, very modest. And then now, however, Russia's territorial demands appear more extreme. In September 2022, Mr. Putin declared 4 Ukrainian regions, in addition to Crimea, to be part of Russia, even though Ukraine still controlled much of the territory. And then on Friday, Mr. Putin went further than in the past, declaring any ceasefire would be contingent on Ukraine ceding all 4 regions to Russia. And then how would a ceasefire work? The logistics of how to put a truce into effect are likely to pose one of the most difficult challenges of any of the negotiations. And then as an annex to the April draft added by Russia's negotiators spelled out how Moscow saw a ceasefire taking hold. They said it would begin when the treaty was provisionally applied, defined as the day it was signed by Ukraine and most of the guarantor countries, including Russia. Both sides would not carry out actions that could lead to the expansion of the territory controlled by them or cause a resumption of hostilities. And then under Russia's proposed terms, Moscow's troops would have more flexibility in withdrawing from the battlefield, while Ukraine would be required to withdraw immediately. Russia's withdrawal would be subject of separate consultations, and international organizations could also be involved. Russia proposed that the United Nations monitor the ceasefire, the Red Cross participate in the exchange of prisoners of war. And then the April 22 draft shows that Ukraine rejected Russia's proposal, but does not show a Ukrainian counteroffer. Instead, Ukrainian officials pointed out that Russia could stop fighting at any time. And then a note inserted by Ukrainian officials in the March draft said the Russian side has ignored Ukraine's numerous requests for a ceasefire. And then it goes about the Ukrainian national identity. And then Mr. Putin described one of his goals, the denazification of Ukraine. The term was widely interpreted as referring to the Kremlin's goal of toppling Mr. Zelensky's government and replacing it with a puppet regime. But Russia's definition of denazification shifted quickly after its initial invasion failed. Negotiators for Moscow wanted Russia to be declared an official language and laws promoting Ukrainian language and identity to be repealed. They inserted 2 annexes in the draft treaty listing the articles of the legal code and the Ukrainian constitution that they wanted repealed, referring to some of them as laws on Nazification and heroization of Nazism. Ukraine balked at including any of Russia's demands in a deal to end the war, arguing that they were not related to the subject matter of the treaty. And then they've got the limits on Ukraine's military. Obviously, they talk about the caps on the size of the military. Russia wanted up to 100,000 people, and the quantity of different types of weapons it would have: 147 mortars, 10 combat helicopters. Also wanted the firing range of Ukraine's missiles to be restricted to 25 miles. And so Ukraine was willing to accept caps, but much higher one. It saw 250,000 people and so on, and offered to restrict the range of its missiles to 174 miles. But that was before Ukraine began to receive significant amounts of arms equipment and training from the West. And then Ukrainian officials point out that Ukraine's military is now one of the most powerful in Europe and so on. Right. So that was the points that were the Times highlighting. It went on a little bit, but you can see that it was a very reasonable offer. Remember what then happened? This was the Boris Johnson. Boris Johnson, obviously acting on the orders of the Biden administration, he told Ukraine, there's no deal, because none of us is going to be a guarantor. None of the NATO powers are going to act as guarantors. So even if you sign something, it's going to be a meaningless signature. Well, anyway, let's take a look at some comments from our viewers. So you got James saying, "Great to see you, Peter George," and then Mary Grossman, thank you so much, Mary, and says it would be fun to see those boondoggle meeting menus. Yeah, it would be definitely good. And then James says caviar and rivers of champagne. Yeah, I think so too. And then R. Brown 1958 says, you don't need a New York Times subscription to know what they're writing. They and the Washington Post are the deep state papers of record. Narratives are first placed in the New York Times and Washington Post. All the downstream news organizations are the downstream echo chambers picking up on all things New York Times. Yeah, that's all true enough. If you monitor the downstream reporting, you'll know what the NYT reported. That's good. No, I think I agree with you. It was just that I think that if I'd had a subscription, I might have been able to see the original of the documents. I don't know, but at the moment I can't see the original of the documents.
Well, those documents, the Ukrainians, if they're there to be seen, the Ukrainians most likely provided them. Where else would they have?
Right. Yeah. No. But that's right. But I can't.
But, I mean, George, what I find really frustrating is something that I've mentioned before is that, all right, we didn't have the details, the minutia of it, but we knew the contours right. At the time.
Yes, that's right. That's no exactly.
New York Times reporting this is like it's news.
No, I'm absolutely. But it's there now because now nobody can deny this, and so you have to then come up with an alternative narrative that somehow Russia was being very, very unreasonable in insisting on security guarantees for itself. So apparently, the only thing that matters was, of course, Ukrainian security, and since Russia was insisting also on Russian security, therefore Russia was being unreasonable. That's, up until now, we'd heard about how Putin wants to restore the Soviet Union, Putin wants to subjugate Ukraine, Putin wants to, he's afraid of democracy, he wants to crush democracy. So now these documents.
Yeah, the Michael McFaul thesis. Yeah.
The Michael McFaul, professor at Stanford. And then Abraham says it's the variant of the wrap-up smear described by Nancy Pelosi about 10 years ago. Place lies in the national media, have the lies circulate widely in the controlled media, then quote the news sources as if they're independent third parties to validate the lies they originated. Yeah,
Judith Miller.
And of course, yeah, exactly. I was thinking about that. In the lead up to the Iraq invasion, We had those stories that were being leaked to the New York Times, but worst of all to the New Yorker and that horrible person, Jeffrey Goldberg. And then Dick Cheney, having leaked all this stuff to Goldberg, would then cite Jeffrey Goldberg's articles in the New Yorker saying, whoa, look at this information. That's confirmation of what we're saying about Saddam Hussein. Anyway, Cynthia, thank you very much, Cynthia. Really appreciate your generosity. So Cynthia says, according to Zero Hedge today, French markets stabilize after Le Pen says she'll work with Macron in appeal to French moderates. Does that mean she won't pressure Macron at all back out of Project Ukraine? If so, does that mean she no longer represents the opposition party?
Well, George and I were way ahead of the curve on this one. Keep going. Way ahead.
No, that's the question. What do you think of Cynthia's question?
I do. There's so many other things that she's interested in. She'll use it as leverage. I mean, this is something that's not important to her, and so she'll say, "Well, immigration, all these kinds of things," and then, I can bend on Ukraine. That's exactly what's going to happen.
I think so. I think.
I don't think Le Pen is a person of real strong convictions. She wants power.
Yeah,
that's what she wants.
Yeah, okay. I agree. I think she's a Maloney type person. I think she wants power. Yeah. And I think she'll leave foreign policy to Macron, but she'll quibble about this or that. She's not against sanctions against Russia. She's just against sanctions that hurt the French. So, I'm okay for sanctions, but no sanctions that hurt France.
Yeah, because she's working for the cognac lobby. Okay.
That's right.
Probably literally. Who knows?
Yeah, that's right. But I think it's going to be a bit of a damp squib, because let's say the National Front does get into power. Well, all right, foreign policy, that goes at Macron's bailiwick. But immigration, that's determined by the EU. France isn't just going to be able to say, well, that's it. We're basically going to throw out all these migrants. We're going to close the border, no more asylum seekers. No, you can't do that. As Hungary has shown, the EU determines migrant policy. So if she tries that, she's going to have Ursula von der Leyen coming down on her like a ton of hot bricks. I said, no, you don't determine migration policy. That's done at the EU level. And of course, there are the courts. I mean, all the courts will immediately intervene. The moment you try to deport anyone, boom, the courts come in. No, you can't do that, and that's against.
Neoliberalism is working exactly as designed.
As designed, that exactly.
As designed. It's to squeeze out your sovereignty, squeeze out every drop of it. Okay,
every drop of it. So I don't think it's going to do anything. I mean, all that she's going to do. I mean, I don't know where she'll have the vote. I mean, maybe they'll try and go back on the pension. Lowering the retirement age, which Macron raised the retirement age, which was an immensely unpopular gesture. So maybe they're going to try and do that. If they can at least do these popular things, splash out some money, public spending and so on, that might, make them popular for the 2027 election. But even there, again, once you're in the EU, there are all sorts of budget restrictions. You can't just go on a splurge of spending, because then the EU comes down on you and says, hey, you're violating the EU, what proportion of the GDP, the budget deficit is allowed to be. No, that's the percentage. You're violating it. We're going to hit you with massive fines if you're violating the EU guidelines on budget deficits. So I don't know if you can go on a big public spending splurge.
It's too late, George. It's already too late. I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's right. But I suspect, you get a feeling that the momentum is with her. People are sick of Macron.
But what is that going to translate into? Okay, I mean, we won, but what did you win?
Yes, exactly.
It's institutionally rigged against you.
Right. That's right. That it is. And I think that's clearly what's going to happen. but you just get a sense. The left, I mean, the left have now formed this the Popular Front, and I don't think that's going to go very far. I mean, that the big deal was to go, oh, the Popular Front, everyone remembers, Leon Blum, 1936, the Popular Front. But first of all, I don't think any of these parties particularly get on with one another, so it's going to be hard to keep them united. But the other thing is that I just don't think this is the time for the left. I think, when you've had the kind of the left in power for a number of years, the people are not going to turn to the left.
What left? Where is the left? The left is gone. AWOL for a long time.
For a long time. Yeah, exactly.
And these are two conservatives lamenting the loss of the left.
Yeah, the left has gone. But you've got, first of all, you've got the Greens. Now everyone hates the Greens, and so they're part of this united left. And then you've got this Mélenchon, whom nobody likes, and doesn't really get on particularly well with anyone. So that's not going to fly. That's why I just think that all the momentum is now with her, and you get the sense in which the political establishment in France is accommodating itself. They've kind of essentially accommodated. They said she's going to, well, not her, but Jordan Bardella will be the next prime minister, and then they think, okay, well, we're just going to. As we did
but
with
this is just kabuki theater. All right, let the peasants blow off some steam. Okay, that's what this is all about. I mean, institutionally and policy wise, it's already locked in.
Right.
Okay. Yeah. Oh, we won the election, and so.
Yeah.
And so.
Yeah. That's right. That's exactly right. And I think that's why the markets are now quite calm. That okay, well, let's everyone is soothed because I think, oh, we've got another Giorgia Meloni on our hands. But in the meantime, we've got the election in the UK, in which Nigel Farage's party is leading in the polls against the Tories. We don't know how that's going to shape out. That may be just a flash in
George,
the
past. I could put Apple up as a candidate, and he would win. Okay, he would win.
Right. The funny thing is that the Labour leader Keir Starmer is such an absurd, laughable, ridiculous figure. That and yet so well he's heading for a landslide win.
No, he isn't. He's not heading for a landslide. It's the Tories that are
heading for a landslide defeat.
Are heading for a catastrophe. It's be clear about that.
Yeah, I agree exactly, because this is a bit different from 1997. So people who remember the 1997 massive defeat for the Tories, they've been in power at that time for 18 years. So since Thatcher won in 79, so they've been in power for 18 years, and that that was it. But at least Tony Blair had a certain flair. He had a certain style. He had a certain
cool Britannia. Yeah, I remember.
Exactly, the cool Britannia. And the people, okay, well, he seemed a more inspiring figure than the doer John Major. But Keir Starmer doesn't, every time he opens his mouth, he talks about, my dad was a tool maker. My mother was a nurse. My mom was a nurse. And I know what poverty is. So he says, and he said it, in fact, the other day on one of these, not quiz shows, but an interview with a live audience. And he said again, my dad was a tool maker, and the audience burst out laughing. And he was very miffed by that. And so, well, it's not funny. It's like, the reason why they laughed is that Starmer always says this, and every time he gets the chance, my dad was a tool maker. But the problem is that his father it's a skilled job being a tool maker, and he owned his own factory. So he owned his own factory, which made tools, and his mother was a nurse. So he basically came from a two-income family. So for him to say, "Oh well, I know what poverty is," well, you don't know what poverty is
Well,
because
it's kind of like John Rockefeller saying, "I worked on an oil rig."
yeah, exactly.
He
So
owned the oil rig, all of the oil rigs.
that's right. Yeah, exactly. And so, and so my dad. First of all, it's a childish way of referring to your father. My dad. Just say, you're a grown up. Your father was this. But he's also talking down his parents. I mean, because when you say, well, as if somehow, that's all they were. They were very, very modest. Whereas I've gone on to great dizzying heights. So you're actually talking down your own parents. Well, he was just a toolmaker.
Has
That's
he
all.
ever had a real job in his life?
Yeah, he was the head of the Crown Prosecution Service, the guy who was chiefly responsible for keeping Julian Assange locked up in the Ecuador embassy. The Americans put pressure on him because basically once Sweden said, we're sick of this whole thing, we're not interested in continuing this absurd investigation. The Americans leaned on him and say, well, that doesn't mean he gets to walk. Because and then Assange said, "Well, I'm not going to go to Sweden." If you remember, he said, "I'm not going to Sweden to be interviewed by the police because I might be deported to the United States. So why can't we do it, through video? Just live streaming like this, and then we can do the interview." And the Swedes seemed ready to accept this. Okay, I mean, after all, it's not like he was facing prosecution. I mean, all they said, they just wanted to talk to him. So, okay, well, if you want to talk, we can do it on a live stream. And then Starmer said to the Swedes, no, you don't do that. You don't do this live stream. He's got to go to Sweden for an in-person interview. And so that's it. So that deal also fell through. And so Starmer was actually really involved in making sure that Assange stays imprisoned in the Ecuador embassy.
Each one of these individuals has their own special stench about them.
Yeah, he really does. He's an awful person.
But it will be good material for us, George.
I think so. I think so.
See that, everybody, that is the only silver lining I see in any of this. It just gives it. I mean, Annalena Baerbock. I mean, God, thank you for that. And Liz Truss, thank you for that. Sergeant Schultz, thank you for that.
That's right. Yes, yes.
The gift that keeps on giving.
Exactly. And then Sergeant Schultz, buffoonish that he is, he gave an interview over the weekend, telling that what a wonderful guy Biden is, and Biden's really so sharp and he's on the ball and he's a fantastic leader, and he's going to win the next election, and so on. So this was a very strange interview because you're not supposed to interfere in other countries' elections. I mean, you're not supposed to go in and say he's clearly supporting Biden. I mean, we always assume that he would be supporting Biden, but he, in this interview, he was making clear that he was supporting Biden and ridiculing the idea that Biden was going to lose the next election. So it's this strange kind of figure.
Well, we all saw it with the G7 confab, making Ukraine aid Trump-proof. They even use the words. They even say it.
Yeah, that's right. Making it Trump-proof. So Trump cannot walk back. So they say, well.
But what's democracy about, George? You vote for a leader who has a policy platform that you support.
Right.
I mean, why are these unelected officials, short-circuiting the people's choice in advance? That's the ultimate form of pre-bunking when it comes to democracy.
That's exactly right, and that's why when they had that whole this, I guess that agreement that Biden signed, this security, this partnership agreement with Ukraine, they're talking about, we're going to make it Trump-proof, but it's not Trump-proof. It's the same executive order. Trump can cancel it on his first day in office. And so anyway, let's take a look at some of the comments that people have made. So these letterings, Peter, they are so small, so I have to really screw up.
I am not embarrassed. I always have this with me. Okay.
Yeah, it's good. But when I do,
hey, look at this. This is classy. This is real classy. Look at this.
it does look good. It's because see what happens is when I screw up my eyes and I'm saying, oh, you need glasses. Time you admitted that you need glasses. Anyway, and here we have Herman Montoya says Colombian President Petro canceled the meeting with Zelensky and the G7. Yeah, that's very, very, very commendable. And then Kai McDougall says Russia obviously wasn't invited. That seems dumb to me. Was Iran and China not invited too? Well, China was invited. China didn't show up. I don't know about Iran. Was it? I mean, I would never thought Iran would show up, but I wonder whether Iran.
Could you just imagine? Could you imagine? At the Iranian Foreign Ministry, and they get the email, and then the clerk there that's going to say, I think they meant Iraq. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. Yeah,
I think there was a mistake in the mailing.
But it would be funny that Iran. Okay, fine. I mean,
finish that. I haven't seen him for a while. Maybe he could represent Iran.
Ahmadinejad shows up. Okay, yeah, this is good.
Yeah, I got the email.
And then we have Herman Montoya says Poland president handcrafted his speech by the State Department and MI6. Yeah, we talked about.
Hey, everybody, that's a really good podcast we did yesterday. I think it's one of our best ones.
Exactly. It's on YouTube, and it's really well worth it. So we talked at some length about President Duda's extraordinary speech, so that we have. K1 says, why would the Russians negotiate with people who have lied to them at every juncture? Well, it's a very good question. I mean, and that's why I think the whole purpose of these talks, as we discussed earlier, was to provide some kind of a guarantee. It's not just simply, yeah, okay, fine, we'll sign, and then the next day everything is forgotten. And then say, well, we never said this, we never promised that. In a way that, what they've said about all these promises that were made to Gorbachev, you can see, well, Russia was trying to figure out some way in which this would be set in stone.
What this whole farce in the Alps was all about, it's very simple, everyone. Just keep it going. That's it. Just keep it going.
I agree. Exactly. So we have that. Colonel Kai McDougall says, by which I mean, this is how many people died, always ends up in some kind of negotiations, even the Mongols, even the Christian Crusaders, except if this war won't end in negotiations. They're not going to do any negotiating. I mean, it's just going to be,
Well, I mean, the only, there's some very esoteric scenarios which one could imagine, and George and I don't spend time on it because it's so esoteric. But if there were an internal sudden regime change for some reason, right. An internal coup or something like right. that, these are esoteric ones. Okay. Right. But as I think this conference tells us anything, is that there's going to be no negotiation. What we're going to get, okay, is I think John Mearsheimer, he used the term, it's going to be an ugly victory, which, we could talk about again at another time. I think it's interesting. But I have an added corollary to it. You have an ugly victory, but you have a miserable peace. That's the best case scenario, everybody.
Right. Yep, that's right. I mean, it's as you say, the NATO powers want to keep this war going. That's that raison d'etre. Then keep it going, and so you keep making sure that Ukraine has the will and the and capability just to keep it going. So it's like, okay, you want another 50 billion, so here's another 50 billion, and you spent the 60 billion, that's already gone. Okay, and then Zelensky said, I'd like 600 billion. Would that be all right? I say, yeah, well,
You're going to have to cough up
adjust a little few numbers to get you 600 billion.
Yeah, but isn't this, a Faustian bargain? Because, okay, we'll get you another 50 billion, but you got to cough up another 50,000 troops.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Oh, yeah. No question. You got to. That's exactly the deal. You got to come up with the troops, and that's what when Lindsey Graham, the awful Lindsey Graham, he said, "Yeah, this is terrible. This draft age starts at 27. What the hell? What are you doing? You got to start lowering the draft." So they now lowered it to 25, but they're going to lower it further. They're not going to stick at 25. Hey, you got to lower it to 22, then down to 18. I mean, you got, they're not.
Well,
the Americans aren't going to allow it just to. Oh, we'll have it just at the age of 25.
If the likes of Lindsey Graham get what they want, the prognosis for Ukraine's demographics is that you're going to have a country full of a lot of very old people, a lot of disabled people, that you'll have a demographic that won't be able to produce a tax base to support your elderly and your disabled. And this conflict is an enormous number of disabled young men. And how many young women want to marry men like that? Sorry, I'm being very coarse.
No, exactly.
Okay? But, that's not going to happen. And given the trajectory of this defiance against diplomacy by the West, after 2 years, George, 2.5 years, and you're a young mother in Germany, and your kid's learning German, why are you going to go back to Ukraine?
No.
Why?
No.
They might want to visit from time to time, but if you have the social welfare system of Germany with your kindergarten and daycare, and they throw in nappies for you on top of it, that's unheard of in Ukraine. Okay.
That's right.
I mean, why would people want to return to that? Okay, when it's going to be an ugly victory and a miserable peace. In a miserable peace, who's going to want to invest in that country? Who? Right. Because it's a miserable peace.
Right. No question. I think everyone in Ukraine who has got out is now living wherever, whether it's in Germany or in Holland or in Hungary. They're not going back. They just that's it. They've made their break and they're not going back.
No.
So we have Eva Reddy says something obvious, but it's important. Ukraine is not in NATO. NATO is in Ukraine. I think it's a very well put. Ukraine is not in NATO, but NATO is in Ukraine. And
it's been there for about 10 years now.
Yeah, exactly. 10 years. And it's kind of an interesting. So they have this, Sergeant Schultz, where they said, no, there was never any plan to bring Ukraine into NATO. No, but you brought NATO into Ukraine. That was the plan. And then Stoltenberg says, oh, NATO is not a party to the conflict. They keep peddling these ridiculous, nonsensical arguments. When it's common sense tell you that what you have done is you've made NATO a party to the conflict. You're endangering all the citizens of the NATO countries, and you've done it on the sly. You've done it by lying to the public. You're lying, saying, "Oh, it's all about it's about Article 51 of the UN Charter." No, Article 51 may apply to Ukraine. It doesn't apply to NATO. It doesn't. You don't get to invoke Article 51.
Well, I mean, but if you look on the day this part of the conflict started, Article 51 was invoked on the part of the Russians.
The Russians, exactly. Yeah. And then Putin's shirt says, when it comes to Russia, its vast resources, nothing the vulture capitalists say in the West surprises. They want those resources, and they've been trying to grab them for more than 100 years and lost. It's much more than 100 years because, of course, it's a very big country. It's 11 time zones. Agriculturally, it's a very rich country. A lot of wonderful arable land, a lot of natural resources, and
one resource, George, if I can interrupt real quickly, it's underestimated and underappreciated in many parts of the world, but that's beginning to change. Russia has a hell of a lot of water, a lot of water. It's a hydropower.
That's a very good point. That's actually a great point. And now you got the Arctic, with the ice melting. So there's all the resources in the Arctic, and then of course Russia, which before was largely a land power. Now it's going to be not going to be a land power.
It's impolite to say politically, but I will say it, and I'll take all the slings and arrows. But this thing called global warming, it's good for Russia.
It's very good for Russia. Very good. Exactly. Suddenly, hey, we're not going to stuck. We got ice in the north, and then we got one. Yeah.
For the Saudis, their lifting costs for oil is basically zero because it's just in the sand. It's underneath. Okay. Yeah. For Russia, they got to go through rocks and ice and all kinds. Yeah. But once that's gone, their lifting costs will dramatically drop.
That's right. Exactly. But of course, Russia has the problems. I mean, first of all, it has a problem, which is it's a population. It's not a huge population for given a country that size. So to be able to control that country, that is a challenge. And of course, it has to deal with aggressors, predatory powers, and particularly the predators from the West. So it has it's a very big challenge. And of course, these predators, are drooling at the prospect of getting their hands on Russian farmland, getting their hands on Russian natural resources, and the way they moved in the 90s, it was very quick. All this, the
everybody
type and the Bill Browders and the rest of them.
And what they did right after the coup in Kiev. What was one of the most valuable assets the Ukrainians were selling? Their land, okay? And a lot of it. It's illegal to sell agricultural land in Russia to foreigners. It's absolutely illegal to do it, okay? Yeah. You can lease land, but you can't buy it.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, that's you're right, Putin should. And then we already talked about that one. And then Harry Smith says, I can remember at least 2 occasions in the last 5 to 10 years when Putin formally offered to guarantee security to all of Europe. Both times the European governments arrogantly and foolishly rejected it. Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. It was
and Medvedev did in the interim.
That's it. It was the Medvedev. That was the security treaty that Medvedev was offering in 2009, and then obviously the one in 2021. So you're absolutely right. Both times it was rejected. Like all these things, it was rejected. Because we haven't even talked about all the arms control treaties, which no one really brings these things up. Like, who walked away from all these arms control agreements? Oh, Putin, Putin. So no, who walked away from the arms control agreements? It wasn't Putin. Anyway, and then Kai McDougall says, Israel is an interesting case because it looks to me like they are self-destroying. I don't know. I can't see the future, but it looks like that to me. It's sort of it does look kind of, they got a war that doesn't seem to be heading towards any easy conclusion.
Well, take a search on YouTube, Ilan Papa. He's has a very interesting take. It's something over the last few days. And I tend to agree with them. Israel may not be coming to an end, but the Zionist project is, okay. And they always make that distinction, okay. There's a lot of issues that they have to contend with that they're doing very badly at, okay. So it's keep them separate, the Zionist project and Israel itself.
Right. And then speaking the truth. Ukraine losing this war, illogical for illegal President Zelensky to dictate terms to Russia. Well, Zelensky isn't doing the dictating. I mean, he doesn't get to dictate anything. I mean, he's a wholly owned creature the West. I mean, he's there, as a kind of the puppet the West keeps around. So, and then John Smith, the Donbass is not Ukraine. It was stitched onto it by the Bolsheviks, exactly, and then this.
Yeah, I mean, you have the Bolshevik founders are the godfathers of Ukraine.
That's right. That's right. And then you have Harasi Fu says, "For George, did you see the comment made on neutrality studies regarding Serbia?" Okay. He interestingly said Serbia signed the fake resolution document and hopes that they'll use it as a leverage for Kosovo. Well, this is, I mean, I didn't see this, but the Serbs kind of do this thing of, well, we can't really sign on to the recognition of independence for the Donbass, because that, of course, means that everyone else can get to sign on to the independence of Kosovo. The problem for Serbia is that you can't play these logical games. Nobody is going to deliver Kosovo for you. I mean, the idea that somehow if you tell the Western powers, "Hey, I'm with you. We have to respect the Ukrainian territorial integrity and sovereignty. Yeah, I support you. Hey, how about using that argument against us with Kosovo? Are you serious? You really think I didn't think of that. There's a logical connection here. I mean, no one's going to do that. They say, yeah, good. You've done this from us. Now go recognize independence of Kosovo. No one's going to do this.
I remember so
consistency.
I can remember so clearly when some Western countries recognized Kosovo's independence. I was in the studio talking to a Russian foreign ministry official, and he was, when they speak in public, they're extremely formal, almost to the point of being rigid and cardboardish. But in private, they're very interesting and very delightful people. And he said, "Oh, the West is really going to regret this one, okay?
Right.
Because we're going to remember it." And
that's clear. I mean, Russia is using the Kosovo and has done this explicitly. They've used that Kosovo example where if you did this, then fine, we can get to do it. Now you can see Serbia will say, "Hey, but I don't like this because we still want to maintain our claim to Kosovo." So we Serbs, we're in the same position as Ukraine. We want to maintain the territorial integrity of our country. But the point is that the Western powers have already made their decision, which is, we want to maintain the territorial integrity of Ukraine and Georgia. We don't want to maintain the territorial integrity of Serbia. That's just our position. We're not interested in these logical issues.
Well, no wonder some countries withdrew their signature, George.
Yeah, that's right. So, it's what's known as, in the great English expression, you're being too clever by half. You think you're being very clever, but you're really not. Your only chance, Serbia's only chance of anything in this world, is if it sticks with Russia. I mean, it has no other chance. It's surrounded by NATO. It's surrounded by countries that are very unfriendly and have no respect for any of Serb aspirations. Serbia's only chance is by sticking with Russia. It may be inconsistent, logical and whatever, but Russia is your only support. Russia is the one that told you that, hey, we will never recognize the independence of Kosovo. We want to maintain the Dayton Accord, so we're not going to use it. We're not going to accept the bullying of Republika Srpska. Russia is your only chance. So for you to go into this meeting and sign on to this this document, which is what Serbia did. Serbia attended this meeting in Switzerland, signed on, and then saying, "Well, we're just being consistent, because of Kosovo." You have to keep it with the Russians. Just keep them happy, because that's your only shot. Otherwise, there's no chance whatsoever that you're ever going to get Kosovo back. The chances are pretty slim anyway. But this is your one shot that you have. Anyway, let's see.
You can't use shame against the West because they have none. Well done. Well said.
Well said. Yes. And then R. Brown says, On the geopolitical chessboard, France is a knight stuck on the back file, slightly more useful than a pawn. Germany is a doubled up pawn. Yeah. Are you good at chess?
Well, I tend to think that that's giving them too much credit. I would just say one of the problems we have is that we have someone like Sergei Lavrov, which is a brilliant diplomat. I mean, really brilliant. Now he's playing chess, but Macron's playing checkers. That's why it's not working, guys, because they're playing two different games. Okay, one takes foresight, experience, cool-headedness. Checkers is none of the above.
Right. No, I agree. Herman Montoya says the Greens aren't left-wing; they are neoliberal, like Macron and Schultz.
They're nuts. They're nuts. Yeah. Okay,
yeah.
That's all I can say. I mean,
that's right. Yeah.
Convinced, and this is just our own humble opinion. Okay, but we're basically convinced that this is a psyop from the CIA.
I think so, and
that's
I think
the only thing. It's the only way you can explain it.
I think so, and I think that if we look at the arc of how they emerged in the 1980s, it was obviously an operation to undermine the Social Democrats in Germany, whom the CIA, the Americans, absolutely loathed. Loathed, from the end of World War II. They always thought they were neutralists, that they had secret kind of pro-Soviet sympathies. They hated them, and they kind of created an alternative left. They'll embrace some environmentalism, against nuclear and so on. And it worked. I mean, it basically undermined the German Social Democrats. And then, lo and behold, in the 90s, the Greens were this belligerent champions of NATO. How did that happen? Oh, that's what happens. You create an alternative.
No party gives NATO more of a tongue bath than the Greens.
Yeah. The CIA, has experience of doing that. They kind of did that in Italy. I mean, in Italy, they kind of created a kind of a socialist party in Italy, which was basically a CIA cutout. Because again, the Italian communists were very powerful after the war. And so the Americans were very concerned that the communists were going to come to power. So they had to invent an alternative, a kind of an alternative socialist party, the one by Bettina Craxi. And so the CIA has a lot of experience of sort of creating alternative parties that seem like they're left and so on. And, and that's what they did in Germany. With luck, this may be we're watching the death throes of the Greens. I wouldn't count on it, but we may be. Because they seem to be doing very poorly throughout Europe.
Yeah, well, the collective IQ couldn't heat up my room.
Harry Smith says Galloway's Workers' Party is running over 200 candidates across the UK. If I still lived in the UK, I would vote for them, no questions. That's going to be interesting. I mean, how Galloway's party does. I mean, I think that's going to be the most interesting questions in this coming election. How does Galloway's party do, and then how does Nigel Farage's Reform Party do?
I just don't trust Nigel Farage.
I don't either.
He's a Trojan horse type guy. I mean, give him credit for Brexit and all that. I do. Okay. But I can remember, George, looking at their kind of docu films, advertising and all. It's very neoliberal. Very neoliberal.
I think so. And they're kind of, it's a sort of Thatcherite economic platform. So it's, it's bringing back Thatcherism. No one wants Thatcherism. I mean, that Britain's has moved on from that. It's just, Liz Truss tried that. Tories kind of try. Oh, let's bring back Thatcherism. There's just no appetite.
Well, when there was prime minister, there was an industrial base to deal with.
Yeah.
I mean, just the economy it's been so financialized that Thatcherism really wouldn't work. It doesn't have the. It doesn't have the clay and mortar, to make that possible. So that kind of economic reality just doesn't exist anymore, unfortunately.
No,
And that's why, George Galloway, George is a man of the left. I'm not. George isn't, but we find ourselves agreeing with George
right.
Galloway on a lot of things. Okay,
That's right.
this is the great realignment, everyone.
Yes. Well, exactly. I think that's going to be very interesting. But the other thing, of course, about Farage is that he's kind of embraced the cause of Israel, and he's done that. Well, I'm not exactly sure why he's done that. What which and unfortunately, it's a phenomenon in Europe of the right. For some reason, the right is absolutely fanatically on board with Israel. Again, it's not clear why that happened. Whether there are more, something going subterranean, things that we don't know about. For instance, I don't understand exactly why Viktor Orban is so in bed with Israel. Maybe it's philo-Semitism. Maybe that's an innocent explanation. Maybe there's a less innocent explanation. I don't know.
The right is, the way liberal discourse over the last, let's say, 80 years, the way they've constructed what the right is, okay, right. And this is a liberal critique, okay, and it always, it will always bring it up to the limit or over the line of fascism and stuff like that. And there's a lot of people on the right that are none of those things at all, okay?
Right, that's right.
Good people, but that association that this liberal narrative is created, they're very fearful of it. And up until recently, everyone, let's be really honest, you could never be more too pro-Israel. There was no downside.
Right.
Okay? Now there is a downside, okay?
Yeah.
There's a reckoning. There's a huge reckoning going on right now. Look at, like Jordan Peterson. What happened to him? Okay. These people that, so many of us look to for, logic and science and this basic common sense. And then they just go off the deep end on this issue. It's just like,
but the question then is,
Junior, a guy that worth listening to, but when he goes on about Israel, it's just like, what is wrong with this man? How can you have such intellectual capacity and facility on this issue, and this issue, and then you come to this one? Everybody's brain gets short-circuited.
Right. But that's when you have to then wonder, is there something else that's going on, maybe whatever, underneath it, maybe there's money involved, some money transactions, or maybe, people are blackmailable, maybe there's.
Well, no, Joe, but it's really simple. There's no downside in being a Zionist in the West. Okay. That's the perception here. Okay. So why take the chance? Okay. Why do it? And even if you look at Bernie Sanders, okay, Bernie Sanders, George and I couldn't disagree with that guy on more than on so many different issues, but he has a lot of courage to come up and say, no, I'm not going to give a standing ovation to Benjamin Netanyahu. Right. Okay, but he's an older man. He's got a safe job. Okay, he has a legacy already, but there's just so much. There's the lack of courage, because that's what it is, and it's such a emblematic of what neoliberalism is. It has no moral compass whatsoever. It is only interested in power.
I don't see the connection between neoliberalism and Israel and Zionism. I think they just seem to be two very different issues. So in other words, you can be a neoliberal and believe in all this whatever capitalism and free markets and whatever free flow of immigrants and so on. What has that got to do with Israel? That's the point that always seems strange. Like suddenly, oh well, and then you got the support.
Well, that's a really good point.
It's just a completely different issue.
It's a really good point. Okay, what I'm just saying is there's certain pieties part of the neoliberal agenda, and one of them is pro-Israel. It's just reflexive. Okay, it's not thought out. Okay, when you have the list of their pieties, that's one of them. Okay, and because there's never been an honest debate in the last 70 years in the West about the state of Israel and Zionism, And now that there is, that piety is like it's just there. It's just reflexively we're pro-Israel. It's not based on any strong convictions. I don't think any of these people have any strong convictions. They just know it's not a good idea to go against Israel. That's it.
Well, that's it. But now, why do they think that it's not a good idea? And that's where it gets into an interesting question as to, is there, it's about power. In other words, is there?
I'll get primaried. I'll get primaried.
Well, you get primaried, but let's look at the United Kingdom. Why would somebody like Nigel Farage? I say, what are Farage's issues? And then you think, okay, well, immigration is obviously an issue, national identity, national independence, sovereignty, against the EU. Those would be Farage's issues. Why then would you embrace Israel? You can say, well, okay, all you would need to do, let's say, Palestinians are not your cup of tea. Fine, okay, they're not your cup of tea. Then you say, okay, well, I just want an equitable solution.
You can't have that position.
Go all the way, not just supporting Israel. Make this like how that the existential struggle of Israel is somehow your existential struggle. That's the part that you have to. Where does that come from?
George, you can't be neutral. You can't say, well, the truth is in the middle, as people like to say. You can't. That is a legacy since 1940. Well, particularly 67. Okay, you can't stand aside. You have to take a position, and you can be punished for it. People are punished for it, and it's probably the single one issue that you can't be neutral on.
Right, but that doesn't. We're not. It's not a question of neutrality. I mean, let's say you're talking about United Kingdom, you're talking about France, you're talking about Germany. You're a politician in the United Kingdom, so you're in a part. Therefore, you have to do whatever's in the interest, supposedly, of the British people. So you look upon the Middle East, and then you say, well, okay, it's not a question of being neutrality. You're just saying, hey, what's a reasonable solution to the problem? We're not going to go back to 1948. We're not going to, give Palestine to the Palestinians or whatever. But a reasonable solution would be the two states. So therefore, why is that something that a man like Nigel Farage unable to say? And on the contrary, Nigel Farage then embraces that extremist view, which is somehow that the Israel struggle is the struggle of sovereign nation states. That's the part that becomes very baffling.
Yeah, and it's extremely illogical because, George, if you were to make that argument on a campaign trail, what are your enemies going to say? He's pro-Hamas. See, that's what they do.
Right,
that's
right.
What they do. It's irrational. This whole thing is irrational.
Right. No, that's right. But that's that. The question then is, how did this come about? Because this wasn't the case a generation ago. Let's say I remember the 1973 war, the Yom Kippur War, and Nixon ordered the airlift of arms for Israel. So he wanted to fly the arms across Europe. And what happened? Europe says, no, you're not going to use our airspace to fly your arms. Even Britain under Edward Heath said, you can't use British airspace to fly arms to support Israel. So that was then. And that was a different time. But the Europeans said, no, you can't do it. We're not going to take your side, which is Israel's side in this war.
Then what happened?
What happened exactly?
No, what happened? What has happened? What has changed? Okay,
exactly. That is the question. What has changed? And I think that a massive operation has been undertaken by Israel, the Israel lobby.
Well, when you think about it, George, you think about it.
Back then, you still had an independent European.
Yeah, but see, this is what happened was. And, if you're a Zionist, you're a supporter of Israel, it has worked extremely well up until now, is that you know, look at all of the parties in Europe. Okay, you know, some are pro-labor, some are pro-immigrants. You know, the only thing, you know, these people, these lobbyists, these influencers, they only have one issue. Okay, you know, oh, well, you know, we don't have a problem with your immigration status, you know, your policies there. We're just interested in one policy, and we can help you out. And they do that with every single party, so it's all diluted all the way through. I mean, how many mega donors in the United States we've heard the phrase? I only have one issue, and that issue is Israel,
Right.
and they don't care if it's Bernie Sanders or John Fetterman. Okay, they don't care.
Right. But Fetterman is very, very passionately pro
Why?
Israel. But this is where it gets kind of intriguing of how did this come about that politicians in Europe, let's say again, go back to 1973, they said, no, you know, we have to think about our own interest. Our own interest is to maintain good relations with the Arab world. Therefore, we are not taking Israel's side in this war. And that was the same thing. Oh, Israel, you know, existential attack on Yom Kippur. The Arabs want to drive us into the sea. We're Jews. Jews have nowhere to go, and all the rest. And the Europeans remained unmoved to say, no, we're not going to take part in this. But now, ultimately, you are targeted. Everybody is targeted the moment they step out of line, which. I mean, it's like inconceivable. Like, you have a British prime minister like Edward Heath who says, nah, that's it. Even Britain saying, no, you're not going to use our airspace.
What explains, okay, Ben Shapiro, I had three in my head here. Ben Shapiro, and then, well, someone like him, when you would watch some of his podcasts on social issues in America. Jordan Peterson, second one, and the third one come to me in a second. You could agree, and Dershowitz, those three. Okay, you and I, I don't know if you still watch Fox News, maybe you won't.
I don't watch Fox News, no.
I don't anymore. But when he would come on to explain what's going on with Trump, you and I were like, well, this is a smart guy. He knows what he's talking about, okay? And I always was very happy when he would give his explanation, and very often I agreed with it, okay?
Right.
And then on other social issues like freedom of speech and stuff like that, pretty reasonable stuff to me. And then when it comes to the issue of Israel, saying, no, whoa, no. How can, this is what puzzles me. How can I listen to these figures and say, yeah, I like what this person says in the whole. And then on this one issue, it's a clunker.
Right. But Dershowitz, I think, is a little different. I mean, Dershowitz has always been an ardent Zionist. I mean, this is a big issue for him and has been for decades. I mean, really, from the very start of his career. What's a little harder to explain is, how do you get to somebody like, Farage, Viktor Orban, for whom this is not a big deal. I mean, again, Dershowitz is a Jew. I mean, this is something that's a very big deal for him. He's written books about, being a Jew and so on. But Farage is not Jewish. Orban is not Jewish. And again, if you're not Jewish, Israel doesn't do much for you. I mean, it doesn't do much for you if you are Jewish, but if you're not Jewish, it doesn't really do very much for you. So it's kind of, that's the curious part of it, is why do they identify with this state? And
when I was growing up in college and in grad school and all of that, you could talk about all you wanted. Criticism of Israel was like, ooh, that was always a bit of a third rail, okay? And people just, and for the very reasons you just said, I mean, so what's, here I am, I'm a biotech student at Kansas City University. What's Israel to me? Okay. I mean, the next guy next to me is an ardent Zionist. Okay. Well, that's important to him. I guess it's important to him. And, because, there's always been this kind of, then a very mild censorship. Now it's extreme. But it's just basically, okay, it's important to the Alan Dershowitz just loves Israel. Okay, fine, all right.
Right.
And not having any kind of skin in the game. It's just like, well, okay, well, that's his issue. Okay. But the problem is that now it has to be all of our issue. That's the problem. Okay.
Yeah, but I think that, let's say in the United States, yeah, the Israel lobby has, of course, been very powerful for many, many years. It predates really, Biden, Trump, everyone else. So it goes back a long way. This wasn't true in Europe. In Europe, that was not the case. When I was at university and later, a lot of people were extremely critical of Israel. I mean, and again, you remember in the Labour Party, the Labour Party, again, long before Jeremy Corbyn, they would adopt these resolutions in favor of the Palestinians, the rights of the Palestinians. This was, always then whenever the Labour Party conference, they would, sign, declarations in supporting the Palestinians. Jeremy Corbyn grew up in that, and Corbyn assumed that, that's still the case. Labour Party supports the rights of the Palestinians. That has changed. All that was purged. I mean, they threw everything out of the Labour Party by citing this nonsense, which they bought over hook, line, and sinker from the United States, that somehow criticism of Israel is anti-Semitism. So all that was purged. So that is a transformation that has occurred in a lifetime. I mean, that it wasn't the case. It was it was actually in some ways support for Israel was the more minority position. A lot of people, anyone on the left would talk about the rights of the Palestinians. And boom, that's gone, just completely vanished. I guess it's part of the sort of the Americanization of everything in Europe.
Yeah.
I mean, just steamroller over everything.
But like I keep saying, I mean, all up until very, very recently, up until October 7th, I guess we can use that date here. There was no upside in high politics to criticize Israel. There was only downside. So, do you think that these morons in Congress know anything about the Palestine-Israel conflict at all? I doubt it. They don't know anything about anything else.
No, but they
have their minder. They have their minder.
They have their minders, so they worry about money.
Okay.
And they
what's
worry.
it to me? What's it to me?
Yeah, that's right. Exactly. That's right. Anyway, so we have.
I appreciate all the crosstalk comments. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Yes. Anyway. And so, Starmer thinks all working class people are the same. A prosperous tool maker is lower middle class. Yeah, I mean, I think so. I mean, a tool maker, that's a skilled job. It's not like an artisan job. I mean, so the suggestion that somehow being a tool maker is like being, a dustman or something. It's not. It's a highly skilled job. And for him to talk like that about his father as he was just a tool maker, whereas I'm a lawyer and I was head of the Crown Prosecution Service. I mean, it's just very disrespectful to talk like that about your parents. I mean, father was a tool maker, owned a tool making factory. His mother was a nurse, so it's a 2-income family. And I think there were 4 of them, 4 children. So they obviously had some money if they could have 4 children. And it's just.
Well, this is one of these things about these elites that they have so little self-awareness. And I'm not a Trumper. I'm not a big Trump supporter. I am not. Okay. What they're doing to him in the courts is just horrendous. Okay. And it's an abomination. Okay. But, you can take the 2016 election, which is world historic. It's not particularly anything that Trump really said, but it was the way he said it.
Yeah.
And what he did was, for the first time in my lifetime, at least, and that covers a lot of time, here was a politician that didn't punch down.
Yeah.
He punched up. Yeah. And people that resonated with people.
Yep.
He's part of that class. He knows a lot about those people, right. Okay? And he punched up hard against them. And people went, yeah, that's what I want to do. Because these same people, all they do is smash me down over and over again. And so you have these British politicians, my father, my dad was a tool maker, okay? Again, talking down,
Yeah.
punching down.
Right.
And the elites cannot accept that because
Right.
they're accredited. They're important people. I have this degree
Yeah.
from Harvard. Hey, look at all that.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean you're smart. Not at all.
Yeah. That's right.
These professional accredited people think they're better than everyone else, and they're not. Look at last 50 years of what they've done is run the Western world into the ground.
That's it. Yeah,
I despise these people.
That's right. I agree. So let's go. See if what was I got?
And Summer is a complete tool. Good job.
That's right.
Good one.
Yeah, that's right.
Good one.
Yes. Where?
Magnifying glass, George. Next time.
Yeah, you got a lot of.
Yeah, a moment of silence for Ed Schultz. I always didn't agree with Ed Schultz, but he was a very courageous man, and he stood up to the corporate media, and he was punished for it, and he was welcomed with open arms at our team because he had an open mind. He was an honest man.
Yes, yeah, that's right. So here we are. Brown says Joe Biden claims to have gone to church every Sunday and temple every Friday. Depends on the audience. I'm still looking for a video of Joe saying he was born poor, black child, like Steve Martin in the movie The Idiot.
Eventually, we'll hear that he was brought up by Jamaican maids. Okay,
that's right. Yes. All right. So Harry Smith says RT still screens on Rumble and Odyssey and on the RT app, which I have both on my phone and smart TV. Okay, good for you. All right. Harry Smith says Iran was invited, and so was Belarus to the conference, peace conference. Okay, maybe Lukashenko should have gone as Russia's representatives. So they probably. I'm surprised that Belarus was invited. I mean, I don't know. I hadn't heard that.
Oh, they're always, we with our very good friend Dmitry Babich, when they were doing the shenanigans trying to pull off a colored revolution there, Dima was very helpful, wonderful guy. I had lunch with him yesterday. And, they're always looking for a wedge. How can we get the Russians against the Russians?
That's right.
Dima would come on and say, well, you can't.
I don't think so. R. Brown says in Mein Kampf, Hitler wrote that every treaty agreement was entered into for a temporary advantage and could always be violated when necessary to achieve a greater purpose. Treaties are only as good as the folks who honor them, and they get replaced all the time. In the West, by the Western war machine, Russia will lose a fake peace if they stand down in return for promises. Well, I think so. I mean, I think
Well, we don't need Mein Kampf to tell us that.
Exactly. We don't need Hitler, Mein Kampf. I mean, everyone has always said, that you just make, you can always ride a coach and horses through any agreement. And the West, they go on about, Gorbachev, it was only about Germany. We never said, there was not 1 inch to the east. Well, of course, that's what it meant, because at the time, the Warsaw Pact was still in existence. So the only issue then was if you were not 1 inch to the east meant in Germany. But the Warsaw Pact was a hell of a lot easter than East Germany was. So obviously, if Baker says not 1 inch to the east, then he's referring to the territories of the Warsaw Pact.
Joe Biden was raised by wolves. Okay. I wonder if he took showers with those wolves.
Yeah. Oh God.
What a really despicable guy that guy is.
Yes, he is.
Really, real piece of work, that guy.
That's right. Yes.
The ultimate expression of the establishment in America. It's
you know
what? They want him to say he's the best president for these people. Oh my God. He's been a miracle worker for them. Okay.
That's right. You remember when he has his big dog? You remember when he was pulling the dog's tail? Remember he had some accident with a dog? I've never heard of somebody pulling a dog's tail. I mean, Why would you do something like that? You know,
That's when he broke his ankle.
that's why he broke it. Yeah, he had some
I
accident.
think there was something else going on.
Yeah, I think so too. It was just a straight.
Sorry, I'm not going to say it here.
Yes,
but when you
right.
blame the dog, you know
Exactly.
something's
Yeah.
wrong. I don't even want to imagine what that guy was doing.
No, and he was a big dog. It wasn't like like one of these small kind of dogs. He has a big dog. I can't remember what breed it was, but it was a big one.
Joe Biden is. I think I lost. Oh, okay. I missed it. Sorry. Joe Biden is a Greek, Jewish, Polish. Can't see. And a Catholic Zionist. Okay, there's a few more in there. Good.
President Xi excoriated the West during his visit to Belgrade, directly stating that China would never forget that NATO bombing that hit their embassy. Yeah, that's right. But I think his words covered a bigger message. No, I think so. But basically, China had to sit and accept it and accept the U.S. apology. Well, we're very, very sorry. We didn't mean to hit the embassy. It was just we had an old map. It was an out-of-date map, and then we were using like a paper map. Oh well, that's the Chinese.
I've been thinking about the China's being more and more strident on the international stage, and I think it's a indirectly related to just the absolute absurdity coming out of Western capitals. I think they've gotten to the point of being exasperated by the double speak and this rules-based order. I mean, it's just all way too much, And at some point, you just have to say, stop it, stop doing that. Okay.
So someone says here, I stopped liking Orban. I mean, there are good things about Orban and things that are less appealing about Orban. I don't find the Israel thing at all appealing. I mean, I have some sympathies that he can't really take NATO on by himself. He can't take the EU on by himself, and you have some sympathy. His stance on the Middle East just seems very, very strange, and it doesn't. He's never offered an explanation as to why he's completely identified his cause with that of Israel.
Does it, in a way, kind of keep him in the circle?
Maybe. But
how many battles are you going to fight? You're going to fight the EU. You're going to fight NATO. You're going to fight the Americans. Do they have that odious American character still in Budapest?
Yeah, that odious American. That's right. The Captain Smith says, maybe there's more interesting question is why Starmer and Labour have gone against their base on this issue. Hence why George Galloway can get elected to Parliament going against them. No, I mean, I think that's
it's what he called retail politics, everybody. That's not hard.
That's right. And what they did with Jeremy Corbyn was just simply an outrage. Basically, come up with this nonsense that Corbyn was anti-Semitic, and this is a guy, anti-racism is, it's at the very core of his being. I mean, it's just, the idea that he's anti-Semitic was always ridiculous. But Corbyn, and so I was saying, he grew up in the left that I remember, and he was a kind of supporter of Tony Benn and so on. So yeah, he was always in favor of Palestinian rights ever since he was a young Labour Party activist. He had always been a supporter of the Palestinians. And suddenly to invent this nonsense that, he was anti-Semitic, it was so dishonest.
I have a question for all our viewers here. I think everyone can see, looking at George's image right now, how the radiant light is washing across him. Yeah. I think it's divine intervention. Okay,
divine intervention.
I think God is God is smiling upon George. Look at that.
That's right.
He's a good mensch, George.
Yes,
okay.
That's right. It does look beautiful. Then R. Brown says, As Peter suggests, neoliberalism is purely about power. To get power, they have created coalitions of groups that are sometimes at odds with one another. And then gays,
But but power structures are never challenged, okay?
right.
And they make us go through a ritual that they determine. It's called democracy, and they make us. We have to be the part of the kabuki theater for them,
Right.
because when all is said and done, what power structures have been impacted? How have working people benefited? If it's left or right or center, how is their life improved over the last 50, 60, 70 years? No, it's all kabuki. It's all we all have to react to the superstructure, the cultural issues and all of that. But it doesn't put food on the table.
No.
It doesn't give you self-respect. It doesn't give you something to give to the next generation. You don't even have resources to have another generation.
No,
Okay,
no,
so
no.
go. If you want, the ultimate kabuki theater, watch Piers Morgan. Okay, that's the establishment loves people like him. Okay,
Yeah.
because he never challenges anybody.
No.
Anybody with power, no, he just kisses their ass.
That's right. That's right. Your dogs sound getting a little agitated, no?
Apple is at war with three other dogs. Apple.
No, that's right. I mean, that's the essence of Piers Morgan, and how he does that show with all his ridiculous questions. These.
Oh, yeah. I know him. I was at a party with him last week. Oh, yeah, we went to high school together. It's over and over and over again.
Yeah.
You're part of the problem, Piers Morgan.
Right.
Okay,
Yeah.
Don't distill the problems for me. You are the problem.
That's right. Yeah. Do you condemn Hamas's action October the 7th? Do you condemn Putin's invasion? I mean, it's a kind of
Well, I mean, for George and I, I think we did a separate video on it when he was with John Mearsheimer. Said, well, shouldn't the United States, retaliate against if Russia uses a nuclear weapon, shouldn't the United States attack Russia? And John Mearsheimer was like, "Are you a dumbass or what, buddy?" Boys.
They sound quite agitated, and it's not about our podcast.
Well, don't count on it, okay?
Well, I think we've covered most areas. I think pretty thoroughly, Peter. I mean, you want to?
Well, I have a question for everyone, and it's more work for George than me, but it looks like we've solved the mystery of the live stream. Last week was
last week
there was no glory in that one.
Yeah,
because there were no comments. Okay, but and this may be a gaggle challenge for George. Maybe you could suggest to us someone you'd like us to bring on to talk to. Okay, that would be the next stage of our development. We're not the youngest guys. Hitting the right tab still terrorizes me.
That's very, very, very demanding, and this was quite substantial to get the hang of how to do this.
You did your slideshow.
The slideshow, and the Rumble. It's very, very difficult. Took a long time to figure out. Definitely, it's not intuitive. I don't know. Maybe for some people, maybe it's intuitive. Definitely wasn't intuitive for me. Anyway, thank you everybody who has joined us. We really appreciate your spending time with us. I appreciate all your comments and ideas and suggestions. We're going to be back very soon, and these dogs are really getting, they're getting into a foul mood. Something is definitely upsetting them. Anyway, thank you everybody. We'll be back very shortly. And remember, if you like the Gaggle, please like, share, and subscribe. See you soon. Bye.